Someone asks why you went quiet, and for a second, you almost explain. You have the whole message ready in your head, but then you delete it. You just say, "It's fine," and you close the conversation. Not because nothing happened, but because somewhere along the way, you stopped believing the explanation would change anything. From the outside, this can look cold, distant, proud, and people who care about you might wonder what happened to you. But what if it is not coldness at all? And psychology gives us a few ways to understand this. Because people who stop explaining themselves are not all the same. They often fall into 3 quiet patterns. By the end of this video, you may recognize which one lives in you. The first pattern. These are people who stopped explaining because they learned that some conversations never end in understanding. They end in defense. You say you are tired, and suddenly you have to prove you were tired enough. You say something hurt you, and suddenly you have to defend why it hurt. You say no, and suddenly your no becomes a debate. After enough of this, the brain begins to recognize a pattern. This person is not trying to understand me. This person is trying to win. And when a conversation starts to feel like a courtroom, silence becomes the only way to leave without losing more of yourself. Because explaining yourself takes energy that people rarely see. It is not only the words, it is the remembering, the editing, the softening, the careful attempt to say the truth in a way that will not create another problem. You're trying to translate your inner world for someone who may not even be listening. Psychologist Sidney Girard spent years researching something called self-disclosure. Self-disclosure is the act of sharing your private thoughts and feelings with another person. In healthy relationships, self-disclosure can create closeness. It is how people move from surface conversation into something more real, but it only feels safe when the other person receives it with care. When you open up and someone listens, something inside you learns. It is safe to be known here. But when you open up and someone twists your words, uses your honesty against you, or turns your vulnerability into an argument, something inside you learns a very different lesson. Be careful. And over time, your nervous system begins to connect certain people, certain tones, and certain conversations with danger instead of safety. Not because you decided to become distant, but because your body remembered what happened the last time you were honest. So when this type of person goes quiet, it is not because they stopped caring. It is because the cost of speaking became higher than anyone around them realized. The second pattern. These people stopped explaining, not because they were hurt into silence, but because they are learning something healthier. They are learning that privacy is not the same as secrecy. Many people grow up feeling responsible for making everyone comfortable with their choices, so they explain before they act. They apologize before anyone is upset. They give long reasons for simple boundaries. For a while, this can feel like kindness, but slowly, it becomes a cage because if you believe every boundary needs a perfect explanation, you are still asking for permission. You are still waiting for someone else to approve your right to choose. Psychologists Edward Desai and Richard Ryan developed self-determination theory, which connects well-being with autonomy. Autonomy means making choices that feel genuinely yours, not choices you had to defend into existence, not choices that required a full explanation before anyone would respect them, just yours. When a person begins to stop over-explaining, something shifts quietly inside them. They begin to say, I can be kind without being completely available. I can be honest without being overexposed. I can say no without turning my life into evidence. That is not emotional distance. That is a boundary. And boundaries often sound strange to the people who benefited most from the absence of them. They may call you cold, hard to reach, different. But what changed is not your heart. It is your access policy. You stopped handing out keys to rooms that were never respected. And that can be growth. Quiet growth. Uncomfortable growth. Growth that looks like silence from the outside, but on the inside, it sounds like this. I know what I meant. I know why I chose this. I do not need to make everyone comfortable with my truth. The third pattern. This one is more painful. Some people stop explaining because closeness itself became associated with danger. Psychiatrist Murray Bowen, in his research on how families pass down emotional patterns, described something he called emotional cutoff. Emotional cutoff is the way people manage emotional tension by pulling back, going quiet, and avoiding conversations that feel too exposed. This often begins early, in families where honest conversations turned into criticism, guilt, or silence used as punishment. The child learns a rule: do not say too much, do not need too much, do not give people too many places to hurt you. Years later, that child may become an adult who simply says, I just don't like explaining myself. And maybe that is true. But underneath it, there may be something older. They're tired of feeling exposed. They are tired of watching their words become something they never meant. They are tired of entering conversations, already knowing they will leave feeling smaller, so they become quiet, short answers, less emotion, no extra details. Research on emotional regulation shows that some people suppress what they feel, not because they feel less, but because emotional honesty has not been handled gently before. So they go still on the outside, while everything continues on the inside, and people around them wonder why they changed. But they did not change in one moment. They changed after hundreds of small moments where explaining did not bring closeness. It brought more pain. And now, the question that matters most: when you stop explaining yourself, is it freedom or is it protection? Because there is a real difference. Freedom says, I do not need everyone to understand me. Protection says, no one is safe enough to understand me. Freedom gives you peace. Protection gives you distance. And sometimes, the same silence holds both. Maybe you stopped explaining because you finally trust yourself. Or maybe you stopped because you no longer trust anyone else. Only you know the honest answer. But the fact that you're asking it already matters. Because either way, this did not come from nowhere. It came from conversations where you were not heard. From moments where your honesty became a weapon in someone else's hands. From years of trying to be understood by people who were committed to misunderstanding you. So if you stopped explaining yourself, you are not cold. You are not broken. You are not hard to love. You simply learned that not every room deserves to hold your words. And the people who are safe for you will not need a courtroom. They will not need a perfect speech. They will not need you to perform your pain in exactly the right words before they choose to treat it with care. Because your silence was never really about having nothing to say. It was about learning where your words are safe. If this felt like something you have been carrying for a long time, you can leave a quiet comment below, even one word, and subscribe, because the next video might show you a part of yourself you have not had words for yet. There is always a reason beneath the silence.